Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it's a great privilege and pleasure to follow on from the Right Honourable Member for Leicester East. I'm very pleased that the House has taken this opportunity to debate such an important subject. With so many conflicts taking part around the world and with our own armed forces engaged in so many overseas places, it is sometimes easy to overlook the ongoing difficulties in places such as Sri Lanka. May I first of all compliment both the front benches for taking what I thought was a very conciliatory tone and one which concluded with the notion that there must be dialogue and a ceasefire. And although the Right Honourable Member for Torvain is not in his usual place, may I also say what a pleasure it was to listen to such an authoritative contribution from him. The difficulties in Sri Lanka, Mr. Deputy Speaker, have arisen for a number of reasons, not least because of ethnic reasons, cultural and religious divisions between the Tamil and Sinhalese communities, with the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE for short, fighting for an independent homeland for the Tamil people. Tension between the Tamil and Sinhalese people has existed for many, many years, but a full-scale conflict has developed since the early 80s, with armed groups operating in the northeastern part of the island, the area mainly populated by the Tamil minority. In the last 20 years, as we have heard, some 70,000 people have been killed in the conflict, and many more have been maimed and injured, with nearly 1 million being displaced from their homes. And there remains the ever-present threat to many ordinary citizens of kidnap and murder, both of which have been a continuous feature throughout the conflict. It is important to remember, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the atrocities have been committed by both sides in this conflict. For example, when in 1983 riots resulted in the death of some 2,000 Tamils, it was suggested by many that some of the blame lay with the Sri Lankan authorities. Both sides have demonstrated a capacity for peace. They did that when both sides approached the Norwegians to negotiate a ceasefire in February 2002. Unfortunately, as we have heard, that ceasefire now lies in tatters, and the resumption of hostilities by both sides has led to some 4,000 people being killed in the last 2 or so years. And there have been particularly worrying developments in the past few weeks, with a real danger that Sri Lanka may end up in a state of civil war. Recent military pushes by the Sri Lankan army have led to the recapture of much of the Tamil-occupied land in the north and east of the island, and the army, encouraged by its success, may well be preparing for another major offensive. It is noteworthy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that on Monday, 23rd April, the Irish News reported, and I quote, "Sri Lankan officials ordered Norway's ambassador, who is trying to mediate a resumption of peace negotiations, to cancel a trip to the Tamil Tigers rebels' northern strongholds for security reasons." The report went on to speculate that this was likely to mean that a major military push by government forces was imminent. And may I at this point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, just comment that many speakers earlier in this debate have spoken of the ban on the LTTE, which they feel acts as a barrier to dialogue. It is nevertheless encouraging that the main people in the peace negotiations here, the Norwegians, are having dialogue with the LTTE and the government, and we must take comfort and heart from that. At the same time, they are co-sponsors, and they have the support and assistance of the European Union, along with the USA and Japan. If it is the case, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the Sri Lankan government, the army, is considering to have an extra push on the northeastern part of the island, then this is certainly a very worrying development, as it will lead to further suffering and loss of life. If the advances are resumed, then it is of course likely that the LTTE will wish to reply in kind, and it could take years to see a reduction in the violence again. Meanwhile, the LTTE have now started making deadly airstrikes on both government troops and the infrastructure of Colombo. We have recently seen a strike on an oil depot, as well as on the main airport on the capital city of the country, timed to coincide with the final of the Cricket World Cup. The Foreign Office website describes the situation in Sri Lanka as, and I quote, "No peace, no war." But the brutal reality is that since the 2002 ceasefire, the conflict has resumed and is in danger of escalating to a much, much greater scale. That ceasefire needs to be rekindled again, and the international community must make every effort to secure it. Britain, of course, has a historical connection with Sri Lanka, and we should do whatever we can to bring peace to that island. I am mindful, however, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that some former colonies are wary of British involvement in their now independent countries. And that is why our involvement should be done with sensitivity, helping as is necessary and appropriate. The Norwegians, operating, as I mentioned earlier on, with the support of the USA, Japan and the European Union, have succeeded in the past when they negotiated the February 2002 ceasefire. They deserve our utmost praise and respect, and we should offer them all the support that they need and want from us. That ceasefire may have collapsed, but to the credit of the Norwegians, they have continued to maintain good links with both sides in the conflict, which may lead to further peace proposals. We should also use our position in the international arena to encourage other countries to press both sides for peace. Britain has considerable influence in the United Nations by virtue of being a permanent member of the Security Council. And whilst we may sometimes have disagreements with our European Union counterparts, we still have influence in the Union. And we should not forget our many friends in the Commonwealth, who should also be urged to press for peace. India also has a major role to play in this conflict, not least because of its proximity to Sri Lanka and because of India's own large Tamil population in Tamil Nadu. As India heads towards becoming a superpower in the 21st century, it is important that they are included in the peace negotiations, both because of their own vested interest, but also because of their influence increasing globally and within that region day by day. I'm happy to give way.